There are many shocking revelations around the released Epstein files, the product of 20 years of federal investigations into a man who built a trafficking network so vast it touched presidents, princes, billionaires, and diplomats across continents. The files didn't just name names. They exposed a powerful system, one that's still protecting people right now. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the fight for justice and transparency is far from over. Thanks for clicking on this video. We're just a group of friends with regular 9-to-5s, but these stories haunt us enough to spend our nights bringing them to you. We don't ask for much, just your subscription, a like, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for believing in what we're doing. Every single one of you made this video possible. On January 30th, 2026, the United States Department of Justice uploaded over 3 million pages of documents, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images to a public website. To access them, you had to confirm you were at least 18 years old. That detail alone should tell you something about what was inside. These were the Epstein files, the product of 2 decades of federal investigations into Jeffrey Epstein, financier, convicted sex offender, and the man at the center of one of the largest sex trafficking operations ever uncovered. Born in Brooklyn, New York in 1953, Epstein dropped out of college, but somehow talked his way into a teaching job at the elite Dalton School in Manhattan when he was just 21. He later moved to Wall Street, worked at Bear Stearns, and eventually launched his own financial consulting firm. He built a fortune that no one could fully explain, cultivated relationships with the most powerful people on earth, and used his money, status, and charm to exploit hundreds of young girls. For years, politicians promised to release documents detailing the full scope of what investigators found. Victims demanded transparency. The public begged for answers. And when those files finally came out, in stages spanning late 2025 through early 2026, the revelations shook governments on both sides of the Atlantic. Careers ended, titles were stripped, ambassadors were fired, and yet, somehow, almost no one new has been charged. So let's walk through the 50 most jaw-dropping things we've learned from the first unsealed court records in 2024, through the Bloomberg email leak in 2025, all the way to the massive DOJ dump some days ago. Because by the time we reach the end of this list, you'll understand why so many powerful people spent so long trying to keep these pages locked away. Number 1. The Epstein Files Transparency Act forced the government's hand. For years, the federal government sat on millions of pages connected to its Epstein investigations. Various legal actions had already unsealed some materials. Court documents from the Ghislaine Maxwell defamation case became public in January 2024. Though they contained little that wasn't already known. Separately, and in September 2025, Bloomberg News independently obtained 18,000 emails from Epstein's personal account, adding another layer of revelations about his relationships with powerful figures. But the real turning point came in November 2025, when the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The Senate approved it unanimously the same day, and President Donald Trump signed it into law. The act required the DOJ to release all Epstein-related materials by December 19th. The DOJ missed that deadline. It released a small batch of heavily redacted files, with over 500 pages entirely blacked out. Bipartisan outrage followed. Lawmakers from both parties accused the department of violating the law it was required to follow. Then, on January 30th, 2026, the DOJ released the massive tranche, over 3 million pages, along with thousands of videos and images. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche called it the final release. Yet by the DOJ's own admission, up to 6 million pages might qualify under the law. Less than half have been made public. The House Oversight Committee has also released tens of thousands of pages it obtained, independently from the DOJ and the Epstein estate. Number 2. The so-called client list does not exist, according to the FBI. During her 2025 confirmation process, Attorney General Pam Bondi told Fox News that Epstein's client list was sitting on my desk right now to review. The statement fueled public expectations that a single document naming Epstein's co-conspirator would be released. But internal FBI communications tell a different story. On December 30th, 2024, then FBI Deputy Director Paul Abbott asked agents whether such a list existed. The case agent confirmed it did not. An FBI supervisory special agent later wrote that investigators did not locate such a list during the course of the investigation. The list the public has been demanding for years may never have existed as a single document. Number 3. An Associated Press review of the released internal DOJ records revealed a striking gap. FBI investigators collected overwhelming evidence that Epstein sexually abused underage girls. Videos and photos seized from his homes in New York, Florida, and the Virgin Islands confirmed the abuse. Yet, according to a 2025 prosecutor's memo, those materials didn't depict victims being abused or implicate anyone else in his crimes. A separate 2019 memo stated that an examination of Epstein's financial records, including payments to entities linked to influential figures, found no connection to criminal activity. This finding has frustrated victims and advocates who believe the investigation was deliberately narrow. Number 4. Elon Musk actively pursued visits to Epstein's island. The January 2026 release included at least 16 emails between Elon Musk and Epstein from 2012 and 2013 years, after Epstein had already pleaded guilty to soliciting a minor. The earliest email in the batch appears to be from late September 2012, in which Musk wrote that they had a very enjoyable conversation. Epstein replied, "Hopefully the first of many." 10 days later, Epstein asked about electrifying his island or his New Mexico ranch with solar panels, and since Musk was then chairman of Solar City. The conversation quickly moved beyond business. In a November 2012 exchange, Epstein asked how many people Musk would bring for Heli to Island. Musk responded, "Probably just Tallulah and me," referring to his then-wife, Tallulah Riley. He then asked, "What day/night will be the wildest party on your island?" On Christmas Day 2012, at 6 in the morning, Musk emailed again. "Do you have any parties planned? I've been working to the edge of sanity this year, and so, once my kids head home after Christmas, I really want to hit the party scene in St. Bart's or elsewhere and let loose." In December 2013, Musk wrote, "We'll be in the BVI/St. Bart's area over the holidays. Is there a good time to visit?" Epstein replied that there was always space for you. A separate scheduling email from Epstein's assistant noted Elon Musk to Island December 6th in 2014, followed by a reminder asking, "Is this still happening?" Musk has denied ever visiting the island. He wrote on X that he had declined repeated invitations and that no one had pushed harder than me for the file's release. His estranged daughter, Vivian Jenna Wilson, publicly stated she could confirm the family was in St. Bart's at the time the emails described, and that she believed the emails were authentic. Today, Bloomberg reported that Musk's brother Kimball was also connected to at least 2 women through Epstein, communications that occurred after Epstein's conviction. Number 5. Commerce Secretary. Howard Lutnick's island visit contradicts his public statements. Howard Lutnick, now serving as U.S. Commerce Secretary, had previously told the New York Post in October 2025 that he severed ties with Epstein in 2005 after visiting his New York townhouse. He claimed he was never in the same room with Epstein again after that. The released files told a different story. Emails showed Lutnick's wife, Allison, planning a visit to Little St. James with their 4 children in December 2012. Additional correspondence showed Lutnick and Epstein communicating through intermediaries in 2011 and 2012. A Commerce Department spokesperson maintained that Lutnick had limited interactions with Mr. Epstein in the presence of his wife and has never been accused of wrongdoing. Number 6. Steve Bannon received gifts from Epstein and planned a documentary. Emails from late 2018 showed that Epstein sent identical Hermes Apple watches to Steve Bannon and his son Sean, valued at nearly $1,500 each at the time. Epstein's assistant noted he would deliver the watch in person. Earlier file releases had already revealed hundreds of texts between the two men. Bannon was described as a key figure in Epstein's long-shot attempt to rehabilitate his public image. In a 2018 text, Bannon proposed filming a documentary, writing, "I'd like to do a documentary on the real story." Epstein replied, "Yes, a great idea." Number 7. Epstein tried to reach Vladimir Putin through a former Norwegian prime minister. One of the more geopolitically alarming revelations involved Thorbjørn Jagland, the former prime minister of Norway, who was also head of the Nobel Committee while he corresponded with Epstein. In a 2018 email, Epstein instructed Jagland to tell Putin, "You and I are close, and that I advise Gates," and to arrange a meeting lasting a minimum of 2 to 3 hours. Epstein also wanted Jagland to suggest that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov could get insight on talking to me. Norwegian police have opened an investigation. There is no evidence the Putin meeting ever took place, but the ambition of Epstein's reach is staggering. Number 8. A draft indictment would have charged Epstein alongside 3 others. Among the most explosive legal documents in the release was a draft indictment from the Southern District of Florida, dating to the mid-2000s. The document described 3 individuals described as Epstein employees who allegedly conspired with him to persuade, induce, and entice individuals who had not attained the age of 18 years to engage in prostitution. Their names were redacted. The indictment was never filed. Instead, U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta negotiated the now infamous 2008 plea deal, which let Epstein plead to state charges and serve just 13 months in a county jail with 6-day-a-week work release. Number 9. The 2008 plea deal shielded unnamed co-conspirators. That plea agreement didn't just protect Epstein. It contained a clause granting federal immunity to unnamed co-conspirators. This meant anyone who participated in the trafficking operation, recruiters, schedulers, pilots, assistants, was shielded from federal prosecution. The clause was kept secret from victims, violating the Crime Victims' Rights Act, according to a later federal judge's ruling. When this provision was challenged years afterward, it became one of the most criticized aspects of the entire case. Number 10. Acosta allegedly said Epstein belonged to intelligence. Attorney Alexander Acosta reportedly told the Trump transition team during his vetting for labor secretary that he'd been told to leave the Epstein case alone because Epstein belonged to intelligence. Whether this referred to the CIA, Mossad, or another agency was never clarified. Acosta was never compelled to explain the statement under oath. He resigned from his cabinet position in July of 2019 after renewed scrutiny from the Miami Herald's reporting. Number 11. Virginia Giuffre died in April 2025. Virginia Giuffre, the most prominent and outspoken of Epstein's accusers, died in April 2025. Her family described it as a suicide. She was 39 years old. Giuffre had been recruited at age 16 while working at the spa at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. She gave extensive depositions that formed the backbone of the original unsealed documents. She named princes, politicians, academics, and billionaires in sworn testimony. She fought legal battles for over a decade. Her death came just months before many of the revelations she had long demanded would finally become public. A posthumous memoir contained additional allegations that contributed to the stripping of Prince Andrew's remaining titles. Number 12. Prince Andrew was stripped of all his titles and forced from his home. In October 2025, King Charles III formally stripped his brother Andrew of his remaining honors, styles, and royal titles, including his peerage as Duke of York and his birth title of Prince. He is now legally known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The decision came after leaked emails revealed he had communicated with Epstein well beyond the date he publicly claimed to have severed ties. In a 2011 email, more than 2 months after the date, Andrew told BBC interviewer Emily Maitlis he had cut off contact. He wrote to Epstein, "It would seem we are in this together, and we'll have to rise above it." In another exchange, Epstein sent Andrew a message encouraging him to have dinner with a friend, describing her as 26, Russian, clever, beautiful, trustworthy. Andrew replied he would be delighted. The king forced his brother to leave the royal lodge near Windsor Castle in early February 2026. Andrew now lives on the Sandringham estate in eastern England, 140 miles from the royal seat of power. The British police are also assessing allegations that Andrew shared confidential government trade reports with Epstein. Correspondence from 2010 appears to show Andrew, then serving as the UK's special representative for international trade, forwarding official visit reports from Southeast Asia to Epstein within 5 minutes of receiving them from an aide. Prince William and Princess Catherine issued their first public statement about the files, saying they are deeply concerned by the continuing revelations. In rare public confrontations, both King Charles and Queen Camilla have been heckled by members of the public asking whether they will cooperate with the Epstein investigation. Number 13. A second accuser has come forward. Following the January 2026 file release, a second woman came forward, alleging that Epstein trafficked her to Andrew at the Royal Lodge in Windsor in 2010. Her attorney, Brad Edwards, told the BBC, "We're talking about at least one woman who was sent by Jeffrey Epstein over to Prince Andrew. And she even had, after a night with Prince Andrew, a tour of Buckingham Palace." Thames Valley Police confirmed they are assessing the information. The released files also included a photograph of Andrew leaning over an unidentified woman on the floor, her face redacted, with no context provided. The files also dragged Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, into the scandal. Messages from an account identified as Sarah showed her writing to Epstein about financial difficulties, saying she urgently needed £20,000 for rent today because her landlord threatened to go to the newspapers. Ferguson had previously acknowledged that Andrew helped arrange for Epstein to pay off £15,000 of her debts. She has described her association with Epstein as a gigantic error of judgment. Number 14. The Epstein files broke British politics. The fallout wasn't limited to the monarchy. Lord Peter Mandelson, nicknamed the Prince of Darkness by the British press, was a major figure in the Labour Party, who was appointed British ambassador to the United States by Prime Minister Keir Starmer in 2024. The appointment was controversial from the start. So Mandelson was sacked from the post in September 2025 after the U.S. House Oversight Committee released Epstein's so-called birthday book, in which Mandelson had referred to Epstein as his best pal. He had previously portrayed Epstein as someone he barely knew. The January 2026 emails were far more damaging. They showed that Mandelson and Epstein communicated for years, including after Epstein's 2008 conviction. More troubling still, the emails appeared to show that Mandelson, while serving as business secretary under Prime Minister Gordon Brown, may have leaked sensitive government information to Epstein in 2009. British police have opened an investigation. Prime Minister Starmer apologized twice for the appointment. He portrayed Epstein as someone he barely knew, and when that became clear, and it was not true, I sacked him. Such deceit is incompatible with public service, Starmer told the House of Commons. Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party and the House of Lords last week, saying he wanted to avoid causing further embarrassment. The crisis has engulfed the Starmer government in a way that commentators have called unprecedented in modern British politics. Number 15. A Slovak diplomat allegedly asked Epstein for young girls. One of the most disturbing revelations involved Miroslav Lajčák, a former Slovak foreign minister and former president of the United Nations General Assembly. According to the files, Lajčák allegedly asked Epstein to introduce him to young girls and boasted that Epstein had not yet seen him in action. The files reportedly show that Epstein responded by offering him young girls and their sisters, and that Lajčák explicitly requested invitations to participate in Epstein's private games. Lajčák's name appeared more than 300 times in the documents. A publicized photograph confirmed their personal connection. Number 16. Bill Gates was referenced in a draft email alleging extramarital affairs. A draft email found in Epstein's files alleged that Bill Gates had engaged in extramarital affairs and sought Epstein's help in procuring drugs to deal with consequences of sex with Russian girls. It is unclear whether this email was ever sent. Gates has previously acknowledged meeting with Epstein multiple times, but said the meetings were about philanthropy and that he regretted the association. The draft email, regardless of its accuracy, demonstrated the kind of leverage material Epstein allegedly compiled on powerful associates. Number 17. Epstein's properties were allegedly wired with hidden cameras. Multiple sources, former employees, associates, and victims, claimed that Epstein's homes were equipped with hidden cameras, recording guests in compromising situations. When the FBI raided his Manhattan mansion in July 2019, they found a locked safe containing compact discs labeled with names and descriptions. The full contents of those recordings have never been publicly disclosed. If Epstein was collecting blackmail material, it would explain how he maintained relationships with the powerful and avoided consequences for so long. What happened to those recordings remains one of the case's most critical unanswered questions. Number 18. A sting. Video shows Epstein's butler trying to sell his black book. Among the released materials was a 46-minute video of an FBI sting operation. In it, Epstein's butler, Alfredo Rodriguez, attempts to sell Epstein's little black book to an undercover agent at a hotel in Boca Raton, Florida, in November 2009. Rodriguez called the book The Real McCoy and pointed to what he said were names and phone numbers of girls who gave massages. Rodriguez was arrested after the meeting and charged with obstruction of justice for failing to turn the book over during earlier interviews with law enforcement. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison. He died of cancer in 2015. The book itself contained names, numbers, and addresses of hundreds of powerful people. Some entries were circled, reportedly indicating they had been contacted by investigators. Number 19. Epstein's wealth had no clear source. Despite being described as a billionaire financial manager, no one has ever fully explained where Epstein's money came from. He had one known major client, Les Wexner, the founder of L Brands. Wexner later claimed Epstein had misappropriated vast sums. Yet Epstein's lifestyle, multiple mansions, private jets, an island far exceeded what a single client relationship would typically generate. An examination of his financial records, released in the files, found payments to entities linked to influential figures in academia, finance, and diplomacy. And yet prosecutors wrote that those payments showed no connection to criminal activity. The source of Epstein's fortune remains one of the case's deepest mysteries. Number 20. Les Wexner transferred a Manhattan mansion for $0 when he transferred his enormous New York City townhouse, one of the largest private homes in Manhattan, to Epstein for what appeared to be no payment. The property alone was worth tens of millions of dollars. Why a billionaire would hand over such an asset to his financial advisor without documented compensation was never explained. Wexner said he cut ties with Epstein in 2007, but faced criticism for not doing so sooner. Number 21. Epstein's death remains deeply disputed. Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan on August 10, 2019. His death was ruled a suicide by hanging, but the circumstances surrounding that night have never been satisfactorily explained. 2 guards assigned to check on him every 30 minutes had allegedly fallen asleep and falsified records to cover it up. They were later charged with conspiracy and filing false records, but the charges were dropped as part of a deferred prosecution agreement requiring only community service. Security cameras near his cell produced unusable footage. He had been removed from suicide watch just 12 days prior, despite a previous incident where he was found semi-conscious with marks on his neck. His cellmate had been transferred the day before, leaving him alone, a violation of standard protocol for someone recently flagged as a suicide risk. A DOJ Inspector General report, released years later, confirmed that misconduct by federal jail guards contributed to the conditions of Epstein's death. Dr. Michael Baden, a forensic pathologist hired by Epstein's brother, examined the autopsy findings and publicly stated that fractures to the hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage were more consistent with strangulation than with suicidal hanging in a man of Epstein's age. The New York City medical examiner maintained the suicide ruling. This disagreement has never been resolved. The phrase, "Epstein didn't kill himself," became one of the most widely shared statements on the internet in 2019. And for many, the skepticism has only deepened. Number 22. Jean-Luc Brunel also died in his cell. French modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel, who accusers said supplied young girls to Epstein from Eastern Europe and South America under the guise of modeling recruitment, was arrested in France in 2020. In February 2022, he was found dead by hanging in his cell at La Santé prison in Paris before his trial could begin. French authorities ruled it a suicide. 2 suspicious prison deaths of men directly connected to the same trafficking network drew comparisons that have never been adequately addressed. Number 23. Over 250 victims have been identified. The DOJ's own press release in February 2025 stated that the files related to Epstein's sexual exploitation of over 250 underage girls. That number had grown significantly from the roughly 40 victims identified in the original Florida investigation and the 100+ identified by federal prosecutors in New York in 2019. The Epstein Victims Compensation Fund eventually paid out over $121 million to approximately 150 claimants. Yet many victims never came forward, and the true number may be far higher. Number 24. Ghislaine Maxwell remains the only major figure convicted. Maxwell was convicted in December 2021 on 5 of 6 counts, including sex trafficking of a minor. She was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison in June of 2022. 4 accusers testified about abuse spanning from the early 90s through the 2000s. They described Maxwell as someone who didn't just recruit victims, she managed them. She set schedules. She coached behavior. She created an atmosphere where abuse felt normal and resistance felt impossible. One accuser was 14 years old when the abuse began. Another described encounters at multiple properties across different states. The consistency of their accounts, despite the accusers not knowing each other, was powerful evidence of a systematic operation. A mugshot of Maxwell, taken from the department's booking records, was among the files released in the January 2026 tranche. Maxwell has appealed her conviction. As of today, her conviction remains the only significant criminal outcome connected to Epstein's entire network. Think about that. An operation spanning decades, hundreds of victims, multiple countries, and dozens of named individuals. And one person is in prison. Number 25. Deputy A.G. Blanche said new prosecutions are unlikely. In a February 2026 appearance on CNN, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stated that the DOJ had reviewed the Epstein files and found nothing in there that allowed us to prosecute anybody. He added, "We then released over 3.5 million pieces of paper, which the entire world can look at now and see if we got it wrong." For victims who fought for years to see the files released, this statement was devastating. The files are out, the names are public, and the government says no one else will be charged. Number 26. Trump's name appears over 3,000 times, and unsubstantiated allegations were compiled. President Trump's name appeared more than 3,000 times in the released documents. Many of those mentions were news clippings collected as part of the investigation's background files. But the documents also contained more substantive material. The FBI compiled a list of sexual assault allegations related to Trump in August of 2025, and summaries of unsubstantiated claims from individuals alleging wrongdoing, including graphic descriptions. Some of those complaints dated back to the 1990s, while others were more recent. Photographs found in Epstein's Manhattan home showed framed pictures of Trump alongside other public figures and celebrities displayed on desks and surfaces throughout the residence. A photograph of the desk was included in the December 2025 release. During the 2024 presidential campaign, Trump had pledged to release the Epstein files. In a June 2024 interview with Fox News, when asked whether he would declassify them, he responded, "Yeah, I would." His allies, including J.D. Vance and Donald Trump Jr., accused the Biden administration of concealing a client list to protect powerful people. Yet after the files came out, Trump argued the release absolves him of any wrongdoing. The White House declined to comment on specific documents and emphasized that it had no involvement in the review or redaction process. No criminal charges have been filed against Trump in connection with the Epstein investigation. One detail that drew early media attention was an unverified FBI tip recovered through the redaction flaw that made extreme allegations involving Trump. The tip was never corroborated by investigators. Number 27. Victims' privacy was repeatedly violated in the release. Within hours of the January 2026 dump, attorneys representing over 200 alleged victims asked federal judges to shut down the DOJ's Epstein Files website. They called the release the single most egregious violation of victim privacy in one day in United States history. The DOJ had published dozens of unredacted nude images showing young women, possibly teenagers, with their faces visible. Several files were removed after the New York Times notified the DOJ. Deputy AG Blanche defended the process, saying redaction errors affected about 0.001% of all materials. But for the victims identified in those files, one error was one too many. Number 28. Faulty redactions let the public see hidden content. The initial December 2025 release contained a critical technical failure. Some redacted text could be revealed simply by copying and pasting blacked-out sections into another application. The flaw was traced to a 2021 court filing by the Virgin Islands Attorney General's office, which the DOJ had incorporated without fixing. Among the recovered content was an unverified FBI tip alleging extreme acts of violence connected to Epstein's operations. 16 files disappeared from the public website less than a day after the initial release, without explanation. Number 29. An FBI organization chart mapped Epstein's inner circle. The released documents included a diagram, essentially an organizational chart of Epstein's network. At the center were Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Branching outward were attorneys, accountants, pilots, assistants, and associates. And some names and faces were redacted, while others were visible. The chart included connections to several lawyers and financial figures named in Epstein's will, including personal attorney Darren Indyke, who was slated to receive $50 million from the estate. The chart also referenced Jean-Luc Brunel, the French modeling agent financed by Epstein in 2004 to launch MC2 Model Management. Multiple victims testified that Brunel used the modeling agency as a front to recruit girls. A separate prison psychiatric evaluation published after Epstein's death revealed that despite his enormous social circle, Epstein had few close friends. The report described him as someone who accumulated high-profile acquaintances through a combination of charisma, charm, and intelligence. The organizational chart made visible what many had long suspected. This was not a lone predator. It was an organized enterprise with defined roles, dedicated staff, and a clear chain of command. Number 30. Epstein kept photos of himself with world leaders in his home. When the FBI raided Epstein's Manhattan mansion, they found drawers and tables filled with framed photographs showing Epstein alongside public figures. Released images showed photos of Trump, Bill Clinton, and even one with Pope John Paul II. These weren't hidden away, they were displayed. The collection suggested Epstein cultivated and showcased these relationships as social proof of his status, and potentially as insurance. Number 31. Bill Clinton appeared in multiple photos, and Epstein invoked the fifth about him. Clinton's name has been connected to the Epstein case for years. Flight logs confirmed he took multiple trips on Epstein's private jet. The released files included several photographs of the former president alongside Epstein, taken in the 90s and 2000s. In a 2016 deposition taken as part of Virginia Giuffre's defamation suit against Maxwell, Epstein was asked a series of questions about his relationship with Clinton. He responded, fifth, to every single one, invoking his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Each refusal to answer only amplified the question: what exactly was Clinton's involvement? A 2009 email from publicist Peggy Siegel described attending a party at Maxwell's home, where Bill Clinton and Jeff Bezos were there. Clinton's representatives have consistently denied he visited Epstein's island or engaged in any wrongdoing. The Clintons have refused to testify before the House Oversight Committee's ongoing Epstein investigation, adding to the frustration of lawmakers and victims' advocates who believe key witnesses have never been properly questioned under oath. Number 32. Epstein wanted to seize Libya's frozen state assets. A 2011 email revealed Epstein's plans to help seize Libya's frozen state assets, estimated by Epstein at $80 billion during the fall of the Gaddafi regime. Epstein sought the help of British and Israeli intelligence to carry out the scheme, offering a 10% to 25% commission. The email laid bare the scope of Epstein's ambitions, extending well beyond social manipulation into international finance and geopolitics. Number 33. The Miami Herald investigation changed the course of the case. Reporter Julie K. Brown of the Miami Herald published a groundbreaking investigative series called Perversion of Justice in November 2018. Brown spent years tracking down victims who had been forgotten by the system. She identified over 80 women who said they were abused by Epstein as minors. She obtained documents, conducted interviews, and dissected every aspect of the 2008 plea deal in excruciating detail, showing exactly how prosecutors had failed the victims and how Epstein's legal team had outmaneuvered the government at every turn. The impact was immediate. Public outrage built, political pressure mounted, members of Congress demanded answers, and within months, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York brought new federal charges against Epstein. Brown's work accomplished what the entire federal government had failed to do for over a decade. One reporter, working at a regional newspaper, changed the trajectory of the case. Without her persistence, there is a strong argument that the 2019 arrest might never have happened at all. Number 34. Victims described a methodical grooming system. Multiple accusers described an almost identical pattern of recruitment and manipulation. They were approached in malls, at schools, or at community events, often by Maxwell or another recruiter. They were offered cash for massages. The first encounters were sometimes benign, designed to build trust. Then things escalated. Gifts, cash, promises of education, and modeling careers followed. Boundaries disappeared. By the time victims understood the situation, they felt trapped, financially dependent, psychologically manipulated, and terrified of retaliation from people with limitless resources. This wasn't random. It was a system refined over years to manufacture compliance and silence. Number 35. Some victims were pressured to recruit others. In one of the most disturbing structural elements of the operation, some accusers described being pressured to bring in other young girls. They were offered cash bonuses for each new recruit. This pyramid-like structure expanded the supply of victims while simultaneously making recruiters feel complicit, discouraging them from going to authorities. The manufactured guilt was a deliberate control mechanism. Number 36. Staff on Epstein's island testified about what they saw. Employees on Little St. James described young women arriving regularly. Some saw topless girls by the pool who appeared very young. Staff were told not to look at or speak to guests. One former employee described his duties as including fanning $100 bills on a table near Epstein's bed, on placing a gun between the mattresses, and cleaning up after Epstein's frequent massages with young girls, including disposing of used condoms. The atmosphere was described as tightly controlled, with every detail managed by Epstein and Maxwell. Number 37. Sarah Ransom described being trapped on the island. Sarah Ransom, a South African-born accuser, said she was taken to Little St. James and felt she could not leave. The island was accessible only by boat or small aircraft. There was no public transportation and no way to call for help without using Epstein's equipment. Ransom described attempting to swim to a neighboring island, but turning back due to powerful currents and sharks. The island wasn't just a retreat, it was isolation by design. Number 38. Courtney Wild fought for over a decade. Courtney Wild, one of Epstein's youngest known victims, was first abused at age 14. She was among the first to challenge the 2008 plea deal, arguing prosecutors violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Her persistence, on spanning over a decade of legal battles, was instrumental in bringing renewed attention and ultimately in forcing the case to reopen. Number 39. Epstein donated to Harvard and MIT. After his conviction, Epstein made significant donations to elite institutions, including Harvard and MIT, even after his 2008 guilty plea. MIT's Media Lab director, Joey Ito, resigned after it was revealed he accepted funding from Epstein and attempted to conceal the source. Internal emails showed staff discussing how to hide the donations. Harvard conducted its own review. The episode demonstrated how convicted predators could purchase access, respectability, and the company of the world's most respected minds by writing checks to the right institutions. Number 40. Epstein's Zorro Ranch and his eugenics obsession. Epstein owned a sprawling ranch near Santa Fe, New Mexico. Reports indicated he discussed plans to seed the human race by impregnating multiple women at the property. Scientists who heard these ideas described them as connected to his fascination with transhumanism and eugenics. The ranch was also alleged to be a location where abuse occurred. Despite these reports, New Mexico authorities were slow to investigate. Number 41. Epstein wanted to freeze his head after death. Among the stranger details was Epstein's interest in cryonics. He reportedly wanted his head and reproductive organs preserved at extremely low temperatures after death. While the detail may seem bizarre, it fit a broader pattern of obsession, with control extending even beyond his own mortality. Number 42. A DOJ review found prosecutorial failures, but no misconduct. The DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility concluded in 2020 that Acosta exercised poor judgment in the 2008 plea deal, but that his actions did not constitute professional misconduct. This conclusion satisfied virtually no one. Victims and advocates argued that poor judgment that shields a serial predator from federal prosecution and protects unnamed co-conspirators should carry consequences. Number 43. Pilots provided critical testimony. David Rogers and Larry Visosky, Epstein's longtime pilots, testified during Maxwell's trial. They recalled flying hundreds of flights and identified passengers, though both claimed ignorance of criminal activity. Son Rogers acknowledged that young women, some appearing to be in their teens, were passengers. Their flight logs became foundational evidence, establishing who traveled, where, and when. Number 44. Attempts to discredit victims were systematic. Epstein's legal team hired private investigators to follow victims, excavate their pasts, and collect material to destroy their credibility. Some accusers were followed. Others discovered that family members had been contacted and questioned. Multiple victims described this campaign as a secondary form of abuse, extending Epstein's control long after the initial harm. The strategy was designed to make the cost of coming forward unbearably high. Number 45. The release was chaotic, incomplete, and possibly manipulated. The DOJ's rollout drew criticism from every direction. The December 2025 release was called insufficient. The January 2026 release exposed victims' identities while redacting some men's faces. Files were duplicated with inconsistent redaction levels. The same PowerPoint presentation appeared 6 times with different information blocked out in each version. Files disappeared and reappeared. Representatives Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, who led the bipartisan push for the law, accused the DOJ of failing to meet its obligations and threatened contempt proceedings against A.G. Bondi. Number 46. Joanna Rubinstein resigned after her island visit was revealed. On February 2, 2026, Joanna Rubinstein resigned as chair of Sweden for UNHCR, a national partner of the United Nations Refugee Agency. After the files revealed, she had visited Epstein's private island in 2012. She confirmed the visit, but said she was unaware of his crimes at the time. The Swedish UNHCR board accepted her departure to protect the organization's reputation. Number 47. French politician Jack Lang resigned and faces investigation. Jack Lang, who served as France's Minister of Culture in the 80s and 90s, corresponded with Epstein between 2012 and 2019. His name appeared over 600 times in the files. On February 6, 2026, he resigned as head of the Paris-based Arab World Institute. French prosecutors opened a financial investigation into his contacts with Epstein. Number 48. Epstein survivors say their abusers remain protected. A group of 19 Epstein survivors released a joint statement after the January 2026 dump. They criticized the disclosure for making it too easy to identify victims, while Epstein's enablers continue to benefit from secrecy. They demanded the full, unredacted release of all files. Their statement read in part, "The men who abused us remain hidden and protected." Number 49. Public trust has collapsed. A January 2026 CNN poll found that only 6% of Americans said they were satisfied with what the government had released so far. Nearly half of Republicans, 3/4 of independents, and 9 in 10 Democrats said the government was withholding information. A separate Economist/YouGov poll found that 49% of Americans believe Trump is attempting to cover up Epstein's crimes, while 30% believe he is not. Trust in the institutions responsible for investigating, prosecuting, and disclosing the truth has reached a low point. Number 50. Accountability remains incomplete and may be permanently. So, as of February 2026, Ghislaine Maxwell sits in federal prison. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Jean-Luc Brunel is dead. Virginia Giuffre is dead. The DOJ says it has found nothing in 3.5 million pages to justify additional prosecutions. Dozens of individuals named in sworn testimony have faced no charges. Flight logs, photographs, emails, and the testimony of over 250 victims point to a network that operated across countries and decades, with the knowledge and participation of some of the most powerful people in the world. The files are out, many of the names are public, the evidence is on record. And yet, one conviction, one person in prison. That's the part that should stay with you long after this video ends. Not any single name or allegation, but the system that allowed all of it to happen. And the system that, even now, seems unable or unwilling to deliver full accountability. The Epstein case is not a story about one man. It never was. It's a story about what happens when wealth buys silence, when status buys access, and when legal power buys immunity. It's a story about institutions, law enforcement, prosecutors, elite universities, on governments that had the information and the authority to act, and chose, for reasons we may never fully understand, not to. The victims showed extraordinary courage. They sat through hostile depositions with rooms full of high-powered attorneys designed to make them feel small. They endured years of surveillance and intimidation from private investigators hired to destroy their credibility. They told their stories under oath at great personal cost to a world that wasn't always ready to listen. Some of them didn't live to see the files released. Virginia Giuffre, the woman who named names when no one else would, who fought for over a decade through courtrooms and depositions, died at 39, just months before the documents she spent her adult life demanding were finally made public. And the institutions that were supposed to protect these girls, the FBI, federal prosecutors, state regulators, the courts, the government itself, delivered one conviction and called the job done. Now ask yourself, does the system work, or does it work differently depending on how much money you have and how many powerful friends you keep?
I want to thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you're going to love what's coming next. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for instant updates on our latest videos. See you in the next one.